Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of Air It All Out. I am Kurt Cadet, coming to you from UNLV's campus in Las Vegas, and today we're going to talk about the documentary The 13th. The 13th is a documentary that was released on Netflix last year that deals with the incarceration rate of African Americans in the United States. Today I have gathered a panel of UNLV students who are going to talk about this documentary and how it affects them. First off, from Colorado Springs, Colorado, we have Sashay Hagler. From South Korea, we have a gentleman known by the name of Song. From Gary, Indiana, Clay Roberts. And from right here in Las Vegas, we have Zach Pinions. Now, from watching the documentary The 13th, I'm going to start off with you, Song. How did you feel, as far as the accuracy level of the documentary was, how did you feel about how accurate it was, and how do you feel it pertains to our society today?
I think it's very accurate, and I think especially the prisoner population is more serious social issue than people perceive it is, especially because it resulted from encouraging the segregation by alienating African Americans as minors and super predators in comparison to other races in the country.
Understood. Play.
I definitely think that it pertains to today's life way more than it would back in the day. I just feel like the significance and the extent of what's going on is way worse now than it was in the past. Honestly, I feel like we just need to come together and actually just end this as a whole, because this is not a healthy way to live in the United States.
Sashay.
I would say I agree with Play. The events that took place in the documentary 13 were very accurate. It's just that today it's happening more than it would back then. I feel like they're finding ways to get African Americans in the system and keeping us there.
And Zach.
Yeah, the distinction I would say between now and before is just that it's much more subliminal and below conscious awareness, and people can't really see it as well as they could have before. So it's more so a developed version of what it used to be, and it does so by being masked as little implementations against a war on drugs or a war on crime, as something like Bill Clinton or Reagan or any of these former legislative acts might have opened the way for mass incarceration.
Understood. And one of the main consensuses of this documentary was about the police brutality issue that's been rampant, especially in these last few years. In the documentary, what is mainly touched on is how police unfairly target and murder African Americans at an alarming rate, and not to mention that even when these situations go to trial, most of the time they are let off. Now, Play, I'm going to ask you, what have your interactions been like with the police throughout your lifetime, and how have those interactions changed how you look at them and also how you look at yourself?
Honestly, I've had positive interactions and negative interactions. I'll start with the negative first. The negative interactions I have a lot would just be a normal stop and frisk. Like, I'll get pulled over due to my type of car I drive, and they'll be like, is there any type of drugs? Is there any weapons in the car? And then I'll get pulled out of my car, frisked, stop, searched. Of course, they find nothing, and then I'm on my way. A couple positive things. The only positive things I get is if I'm in like sports and they actually recognize me, and then they come up and actually say, you did a good job today. That's the only time I've ever felt any positive vibes from police.
I think I saw that in Remember the Titans once in a scene where I think the main black football player, Wood Harris, as a matter of fact, he had a police officer stop him randomly out of nowhere, and he was a little bit nervous, and then the police officer gave him a compliment about how well he played in the game last night.
Exactly.
Kind of sure. I mean, it's unfortunate it takes that for them to like be nice to us in certain ways.
Still gotta take
at the
it
same time. It's a good look. Okay, and Sashay?
I would say my interactions with police, for the most part, have been pretty positive. Besides for getting stopped for like something minor, like speeding or something, or parking tickets. But even when we are stopped, like before, my sister, she's pulled out her phone and she's recorded because she doesn't know what the end result will be. And then as far as with my family, their interactions, I would say, are pretty negative. Like, they know the majority of my uncles by first and last name. That's how much they've been in and out of the system, or they've been called.
Interesting. And Song?
I personally have never had any positive nor negative interactions with the police. However, from my experiences with media, I've noticed that it often portrays African Americans as criminals and makes false justification of police brutality.
And Zach?
I feel like every encounter I've had with police is has usually gone in my favor, I would say, unless I'm like obviously speeding or breaking a law of some kind. And I mean, I haven't even been subject to searches or anything, which I feel like, I mean, I don't know if I can amount it to white privilege entirely, but it feels like if I was a black person in the same position, I wouldn't have it as easy. I feel like, yeah, it could go that way. Get the minimal, but I would never get pressed for a car search or anything, which I'm sure, you know.
So I have a question. You said you don't think it's white privilege.
I don't know if I can totally amount it to white privilege. Like I don't have enough evidence gathered to say, but you know, it's seeming like it. You know.
Yeah, but like, wouldn't it be white privilege because half the time it's white privilege if you don't even know, like.
Yeah.
So then,
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like the whole concept of this 13 documentary, everything that they're doing is completely below subconscious, like below conscious awareness, you know. So even things on the level of white privilege being implemented through the little acts of being pulled over and stuff, definitely it finds its way in the roots of things and not in conscious, visible.
Zach, just a follow-up question. After watching this documentary, do you look at those differently who aren't black, who make certain comments as it pertains to African Americans about how they should protest a certain way, how they should behave a certain way in order for the police not to target them? Do you think those individuals come off as more ignorant now that you've watched a piece like this?
Which individuals?
You know, like just random people on Facebook, or like maybe some of your friends you have around your inner circle who may not be black, who aren't black, and who may not understand.
I think that, so there's a good analogy. If all the houses in the neighborhood are, you know, every house represents a different culture. If one house is on fire, you're not gonna pour water on every single house. You know, you're gonna pour water on the house which is on fire. So yeah, all lives matter, sure, that's obvious, but black lives are particularly, you know, on fire, I would say. So that's what needs attention. That's what needs. So all the attention, Colin Kaepernick, and that is needed right now. That's the stuff that to bring the issues to the forefront. All lives matter, but right now black lives need attention. Yeah.
Speaking of which, now that you've watched this documentary, do you look at certain people differently who comments about how black African Americans protest or express themselves a certain way? You know, certain individuals who, I don't want to say are racist, but you know, kind of have a misunderstanding about the struggles black people deal with. Do you have a different perspective on them?
A different perspective on what exactly? I'm sorry.
Just basically, let's say, for example, you see an individual on Facebook comment negatively about a social issue dealing with African Americans, saying, "Oh, they're just making excuses. They have it good. They should stop complaining." Do you look at individuals like that differently after viewing this documentary?
Yeah, I just feel like they're misinformed, or they don't truly understand the issue at hand, or they're seeing it as something that it's not, and it's truly, I think, can be boiled down to just a lack of empathy or a lack of understanding the situation, ignorance, in other words. It's important to, like, we need these rallies and we need these protests and we need people, and what we don't need is people denouncing it and taking the spotlight away from it. So it's important that we have these rallies and protests because it brings it to the forefront.
Did anyone else want to add anything else?
Can you kind of reiterate the question one more time?
From watching the documentary The 13th, do you view those who are not African American differently, that judge African Americans for how they act, how they behave, and how they protest?
Okay, being myself, I never downgrade anybody. I know judging a book by its cover is really used often, but I tend to not do that. Of course, just as Zach said, they're just misinformed and they don't understand yet. Just come and sit down with us and actually have a civilized talk. I mean, you won't know until you get to meet me. So how can you judge a book by its cover if you don't even know which book you're reading?
Absolutely. And the final question, if there is anything at all that you believe can be done to fix this issue or make it better, what do you think it could be? Start off with you, Sashay.
I feel like it starts with the black community. So for us, I feel like we need to help people understand like who we are and where we're coming from, because like Clay said, they're misunderstood. You know, they don't understand who we are, and they don't understand suffrage. They don't understand what we've been through. So I feel like we should take that time to help get them up to speed and let them know like you're wrong, and I just want to help you out.
Sam?
As stated earlier, media is the primary source where people of different races like myself is exposed to this injustice. So media should be better served to the people so it doesn't promote like false injustification. Injustices.
Absolutely. Zach?
Yeah, I think on a personal level, it needs to be emphasized that we need to spread knowledge, and we need to just let people know and not jump to conclusions and give them any way to facilitate ignorance or biases. It comes with personal interactions, and I think that's the best way. I mean, the mass protests are important in getting the attention, but to do a change on an individual level, I think requires some kind of person-to-person relation and knowledge information.
I have a question for you, Zach. Why do you feel that like other races or in particular Caucasians are afraid to interact with us? Why are they so standoffish?
That I don't know. That's interesting. It's gotta play some kind of predisposition that they've built in their brain. It's ugly that's even a question in the first place. But it's got to do from it boils down to ignorance or bias or the way you're raised. The associations these people have associated black people with some kind of fear. And where that comes from is it could be anywhere. It could be the way they're raised, or media, or past relationships. But regardless, it's all jumping to a conclusion, and it's generalizing. So that's where that would come from, I would say.
And play.
Honestly, I wish we could be able to wake up in the morning and actually say we live in a diverse community. As Sashay said, we live in a black community, and in order for us to actually express how we feel and what's going on, we need a powerful white community to come together and actually allow the black community to tell them what's going on, so we can get some recognition and actually come together so everyone's on the same page. But until then, we won't be on the same page, and everything will be diverse. I mean, not diverse, but segregated instead of diverse. Like, we could live in a diverse world and still have the same equalities, but we don't. We segregate ourselves due to prior knowledge we learned from family members, media, even your teachers. So that's where my stand is. We need to come together as a diverse community.
Understood. All right, well, that's it. That does it today for today's edition of Air It All Out. Tomorrow we will feature part 2 of the discussion about the 13th documentary, where I will speak to several more UNLV students about their feelings and their thoughts about this given piece of work. Thank you very much.
So, we're live with... So, hey y'all, you're live with Jamila on the streets here at UNLV. We're literally walking in the middle of the street, if you didn't see that car. So, this is hard-hitting news, and hopefully I don't get hit telling you. So, we're with Miss Clarissa today. We're walking to a meeting, always about business here on campus. But we're about to see what the students think and how they feel about the criminal justice system. How are you doing today, Clarissa?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. So I have a few questions I'd like to ask you. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. So I'd like to know your opinion on what should happen to inmates after they're released from prison.
That's a pretty good question. I haven't thought about that too much. Inmates should be given resources when they're released from jail, because I think that once they're released, it's hard to kind of know what is available for them to do, because they're used to a certain system and environment. So I think that resources should be given. Like, there could be organizations that help out those folks, or nonprofits. So yeah, I definitely think that there should be some focus on that, definitely.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. A lot of inmates nowadays aren't getting the proper resources once they're being released from these prisons and jails. So we want to make sure that they also know that they have a place here in society. So another question for you is, what happens to the people who are affected by the war on drugs? Do you know anything about that? What do you think happens to the people who are, have been affected by the war on drugs?
Well, I think that those people, probably hits them hard, because it was something that has dramatically changed. A lot of the laws have changed, and there's a lot of people who are serving hard time for that right now. So I think it's definitely something that they may be thinking about, pondering upon, and I think it's just interesting how our system has changed, and now there's not as many policies against it, and there's more leniency given. So I think it's definitely a topic worth exploring and talking about.
Well, as we head to our next place, I still have a few more questions for you, okay? So, do you think that people of color are more likely to commit crime? And if so, why?
People of color are more likely to commit crime. Oh, I wanted to ask him right away. But ask him.
We're still live in the streets with Clarissa.
Oh, there you are. Okay, so are you gonna keep those parts?
Yeah, this is a full video. They're gonna either clip it or it's gonna go live. Either way, it's all you, boo boo.
Don't make me sound bad.
You're gonna
ask me the question again.
So the question is,
How you gonna guess what
are
live
people
ready?
so are people of color more likely to commit crimes, and if so, why?
I do not believe people of color are more likely to commit crimes. Crimes are being committed at high rates with different populations of people. Even the nicest environments can have serious crimes committed. I think it's definitely a myth and like a perception that society has, but I don't think necessarily it means that people of color commit higher crime rates. I think it's just we're kind of programmed to believe that way because I feel like the society enforces that. But I think if you take a look at the stats and the actual rates, it may not be as we perceive it to be.
Yeah. Hey y'all, so we're live on the streets, back at it with Jamila. We're at the CSJ. We're sneaking on Ashley right now. Hey Ashley, I have a few questions for you. Are you down to answer them today?
Sure. Are you leaving them to the police?
Maybe. I'm just kidding. So, Ashley, I have a few questions. And the first one is, what is your opinion on what should happen to inmates after release from incarceration?
I think they should be fully rehabilitated so that they can re-enter society and basically not fall into the same traps that got them incarcerated in the first place. Okay. Like that answer, straightforward. I have another question. So, are people of color more likely to commit crime? And if so, why? No. If I'm not mistaken, I believe people commit crimes like at virtually the same rates across the board. But I do know that people of color who are also overrepresented in like the lower income of the country, they're more likely to commit like economic crimes. Next question is, if you could change one thing to better the treatment of people within the criminal justice system, what would it be and why? I don't know. It's like everything. Hopefully, one thing, I think you kind of have to weed out the corruption, when it comes to law enforcement and the judicial process. Also, kind of changing how litigation is, because how prosecutors, how they don't want to even go to trial. They just want you to take the plea deal or whatever, and now you're a felon. I think they need to do better on re-entry programs. They need to take off restrictions to business licenses or all types of licensure that basically let people basically make something of themselves once they get out of prison. Don't bar them from housing. Don't keep them from getting financial aid at school. Basically stop taking away everything that we know helps them be successfully reintegrated into society and actually have a higher chance of achieving higher socioeconomic status. Okay, and pertaining to one thing that you mentioned in my last question, do you know any re-entry programs within your area? So within the Las Vegas area? I don't. Okay. Well, thank you so much for answering these questions. You go ahead, keep relaxing at the CSJ, and I hope you enjoy your day. Thank you. All right, bye. Bye. And we done. We out here.